Blog Talk Radio.
93. County 23, I'll give you a corrected address, but you do have a fire in a one-story ordinary. Looks like it's about 40 by 120, 125. County 23, we'll get to traffic control. Squad 5, Squad 5. And go to 273, 273. And go Battalion 18, 18th Battalion. Go to 273, 273.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fire Engineering Talk Radio and tonight's installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. I am your host, Tom Merrill, and I'm glad to have you in listening. And today is Tuesday, March 13th, 2018. This is the show for the Volunteer Fire Service. It's for all of you out there who support my premise, and that's the premise of the show. And this show is dedicated to the over 815,000 volunteer firefighters in the United States who I know share the premise that being professional has everything to do with how we handle the job, how we deliver service, how we deliver competent and compassionate service, training hard, and training to be prepared to meet whatever challenges it is that we are expected to handle, and taking care of our customers and our communities and the people in the communities. That's what it's all about. Again, it's dedicated to you 815,000 volunteer firefighters throughout the United States, staffing almost 20,000 all-volunteer firehouses. It's also dedicated to the hundreds of thousands of volunteer firefighters spread across all of North America and beyond into the world, as a matter of fact. You know what? More so, it's a show that's dedicated to all firefighters, all of us who share that belief that we are there to provide a service, a competent service, day in and day out. So I really want to thank you for listening in tonight, where, again, we can examine challenges, talk about issues, talk about successes, talk about failures, and be honest about those as well in our great volunteer fire service. And as always, we look for your phone calls. Feel free to call in to talk about tonight's subject, to talk about anything on your mind, to add your input to the issues and challenges of being a volunteer firefighter, a professional volunteer firefighter. If you'd like to call in, again, the number is 760-454-8852. Let me know what's going on in your neck of the woods, wherever you're proudly serving, and we'll talk about it tonight. Hey, there's a few things that I just want to make you aware of. I know most of you check out the websites and the fire websites that are out there and are pretty well versed in everything going on. And but every now and then things come across my desk that I think it's important to share, because we're all busy and you may miss some of these things. So I keep my eyes and ears open for things that really affect the volunteer fire service. And one of the best websites, of course, is fireengineering.com. But there's a lot of other ones as well, and whatever you check, you should do it regularly, because there's so much good information out there. And just to let you know, a couple big things going on. And the first one that I thought was interesting, especially for the volunteer fire service, because so many struggle in so many ways financially, even just putting gear on their members, is the Globe Gear Giveaway. And Globe is in partnership with DuPont Protection Solutions and the National Volunteer Fire Council. They're teaming up, and this is the 7th year they've done it, to provide a turnout gear donation to volunteer fire departments that need it. And since 2012, Globe and DuPont, they provided over 402 sets of gear to 82 fire departments nationwide. And the application period for the 2018 Globe Gear Giveaway is open now, and they're going to award 13 departments 4 sets of new gear. That's 52 sets that they're going to be giving away. And it's something that if you're interested in, you can get some information on that on the National Volunteer Fire Council's website, which is nvfc.org, and there's a link on there. And this is, again, for all or mostly volunteer departments. There's some stipulations as far as the population served and some others, and just something that you might want to check out, some important information on there that might be able to help you out. And also there's a application period is going to be opening up for the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Responses, also known as the SAFER grant. The application period will be opening on Monday, March 26th, and it'll go all the way till April 27th. Some great information, again, is on the National Volunteer Fire Council website about steps you can take to maybe put together an application for a SAFER grant and help out your fire department. There's also some information on the website about other types of grants. There's a Josh Sellers training grant that's available, and it's an interesting one. Josh Sellers and the National Volunteer Fire Council, they're partnering to provide 10 volunteer departments with $5,000 each to provide training for their membership. And they've been awarding a couple winners every a couple a month. And Josh Carr was the founder of Josh Sellers, which is a winery, and he created this brand, this scholarship, and money to give away in honor of his father, who was a volunteer firefighter. And again, there's some information on the National Volunteer Fire Council website. So some really good information going on there, and I encourage you to check it out, see what's, stay on top of what's happening in our great fire service. And again, I hope things are going well where you are. I've been having an opportunity again to talk to many of you, been traveling quite a bit, got several coming up in the next few months. And I love going out and meeting the volunteer firefighters and firefighters all over our great country, because there's so many great people out there, so many people that I talk to that are just doing wonderful, great things. And I love to share your stories. So feel free to call in tonight at 760-454-8852 and tell me whatever's going on in your neck of the woods, wherever you are proudly serving. And you know what? Wherever you do serve, I hope it is indeed proud. I hope you serve with pride, because I know sometimes things go on and we all need a little pick-me-up. And you know what? There's a lot of ways to get that pick-me-up. And for me, and I think it's one of the best ways ever is to get a pick-me-up is to attend FDIC, which I can't believe is a month away. You know, FDIC, as a reminder, Fire Department Instructors Conference, running April 23rd to the 28th in downtown Indianapolis, and there is no better way to get your batteries charged, to mingle and network with the greatest firefighters this world has ever known, to take the best training classes. And, you know, and if you're not fortunate enough to be able to attend that, there's a lot of other ways to charge your batteries. You know, surround yourself with other like-thinking people. Work hard to move your department forward. Yes, understand it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. But you know what? It's so important to work together, to work as a team for the good of your department. Yeah, we're not always going to agree. That's normal in any organization, but we can always explore ideas together and discuss our differences and come to a consensus and try to understand why maybe someone doesn't have the same opinion you have or hold the same belief in a bylaw you're pushing through or an idea you're pushing through. But we can still come to consensus. We can still meet halfway. You know, I think you remember last show we spent a couple of hours with legendary Fire Chief Rick Lasky talking about issues and challenges in our volunteer fire service. And we talked so much about leadership as well, didn't we? I mean, we've been focusing on leadership quite a bit on this show. We've had many guests over the last couple of years, many prominent guests who have discussed leadership in the volunteer service. Why is that? Because it's so important. Over and over again, I keep hearing from people discussing the lack of leadership in their organization. And folks, it doesn't matter what the organization is. I'm not just talking the volunteer fire service. It doesn't matter what organization or what business people are in. I continue to hear stories, and I continue to hear firsthand accounts. I continue to hear firsthand gripes about the lack of leadership, the lack of vision, the lack of motivation, the double standards, the issues, the problems in whatever organization these people belong to. And, of course, I take an interest in the fire service because that's what we're all here doing, right? The fire service. But there's so many leadership issues. Our nation is crying for good leadership. And, indeed, there's no shortage of leadership courses. There's no shortage of leadership podcasts. There's no shortage of leadership books. Heck, as I look at my bookcase in my home office right now, I see leadership books written by military leaders, business tycoons, politicians, and yes, of course, firefighters, successful fire service officers and leaders. And yet, even with all this great information out there, leadership training continues to be requested, and firefighters, again, especially in volunteer departments, continue to discuss how leadership is lacking in their organization, even with all these resources that are at our fingertips. But it's hard, isn't it? It's hard being a volunteer fire service leader. Heck, being a volunteer firefighter isn't putting food on your family's table, is it? And as a leader in the volunteer fire service, it's important to inspire your people. You want them to want to be there. I guess you could order them, but that will definitely grow old after a while. And if you're not leading people right, if you're not motivating them, if you're not inspiring them, then you're going to find yourself alone at that work detail, that community event, that fire prevention program, or worse, at that emergency call. Leadership training can be so hard to take in the volunteer fire service. Not only do we need to motivate ourselves to do it, but we got to fit it in between everything else that we're doing, right? We train so much on so many other things. We're training to be the best firefighter we can be, the best EMS provider. We've got fundraising details. We've got our personal life. Heck, I just said it's not putting food on your table, is it? Volunteering in your hometown departments. We've got Little League games. We've got the school concerts. We've got activities with our kids. So we go to drill night. We go to an occasional class, and hopefully more than occasional classes, to make ourselves a better firefighter. And there's no time left to maybe take leadership training, is there? As I said, in a volunteer organization, very hard, because in a paid department, they can send you to courses. They can make it part of your work week, right? They can help you get that extra training by making it part of your regular shift or day at the office, so to speak. We can't do that. We can't send our members all the time to professional development to help mold you into a better leader. So part of it is up to us. It's up to us in the volunteer fire service, isn't it? All of us. I'm not talking, tonight's show is not focused just at officers. As a firefighter, work to make yourself a better firefighter, because a good firefighter is a good leader. And yes, as an officer, work to make yourself a better officer. And there's lots of ways to do it. Yes, being proficient in tools, going to call is one way. Perfecting inventory management and running programs like fire prevention. Maybe serving as a director or secretary, learning the nuances of those offices. Yes, that's part of being a good officer. As a chief and a president, now there's a lot of business skills and administrative skills you need to master. But the one constant in all this is leadership. And it can be offered by anybody at any rank. Heck, if you're a probie, you can be a leader. Be a probie to the next new probie that steps foot in the door. If you're a veteran, a senior member, lead by example. And everyone in between, lead by example. Every one of us, as a leader, looks in the mirror. Are we being effective? Are we getting people to get our message? Are we delivering that message? Are we complaining, or are we inspiring? Remember, if you're not getting the troops out there to perform, if you're not being successful, it starts with you. Look in the mirror. What can you do better? One thing we can all do is learn from those who have been there. Learn from those who have been successful. And as I said, there is no shortage of great material out there. Pick what works for you. Videos, magazines, books, YouTube. Realize it's important to do it. There's very few natural leaders out there. Every one of us can get better. And here's the good news. It's never too late to start. You can hit the reset, start over. Looking in the mirror, looking at yourself, I need to get better, you can do it. Your organization needs some inspiring, reset, move forward. You can start now. It is never too late. Again, welcome to the show, Fire Engineering Talk Radio, the professional volunteer fire department. Thank you to Fire Engineering for sponsoring these shows. Thank you to Fire Engineering for putting on FDIC, the best fire conference in the world. If you'd like to call in and talk, the number is 760-454-8852. I get pretty fired up about leadership because in my neck of the woods, in my what I do with my presentations and talking to so many of you out there, it continues to come across my desk via email and letters and phone calls about leadership issues, leadership challenges, and leadership success stories. So I got a book for Christmas this year. I got a book, and you're going to hear a lot about it tonight, and I encourage you to seek out this book because of all the leadership books that I've read, this is one of the easiest to read, but one of the ones that made the most impact on me as a volunteer firefighter. I encourage you to look up Hal Moore on leadership, Winning When Outgunned and Outmanned. Now, for those of you who maybe don't know who Hal Moore is, Google his name. Just reading about him will inspire you, will make you want to be a better officer, a better leader. Google Hal Moore. Lieutenant General Harold G. Moore. He was quite a man. He was a United States Army lieutenant. He became a general and later in his life an author. Recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, which is, by the way, the U.S. military's second highest decoration for valor. And he was the very first one in his West Point class of 1945 to be promoted to the brigadier general ranks. Then he made it to major general and lieutenant general. Now, he is best remembered, and I'm sure many of you know this, or when I mention it will then remember this, but he's best remembered as the lieutenant colonel in command of the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment at the Battle of Ia Drang in 1965 during the Vietnam War. That's the battle that was made into the movie We Were Soldiers back in 2002, in which actor Mel Gibson starred as Moore. Now, this Battle of Ia Drang Valley was the first major battle between the United States Army and the North Vietnamese Army, and it was conducted in 1965. Lieutenant Colonel Moore led the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, into a week-long battle in the Ia Drang Valley. They were encircled by a vastly, vastly superior force, and they battled and they fought, and a legend was born. And I encourage you to read up on the Battle of Ia Drang Valley. I encourage you to see the movie We Were Soldiers Once, released in 2002. There's a book by the same title that describes the battle in detail. The book is called We Were Soldiers Once and Young. And in the twilight of his life, Moore put together the outline for this book that we're going to discuss tonight, Hal Moore on Leadership, Winning When Outgunned and Outmanned. Moore was an extremely inspirational leader, an extremely competent leader. He demanded and received excellence from his subordinates. He was loyal, he was tough, and I don't think anyone can deny the fact that he was indeed a leader. Now, why am I picking him, a military commander, someone who fought in combat, and talk about him and how it relates to the volunteer fire service? Well, as we go through this tonight, I think you'll see why. What he lived through, no doubt we should pay attention to. He personified outstanding leadership. What did I just say we continue to hear in all of our volunteer firehouses across this land? We need leadership. He personified it. Whatever your profession might be, whether it's your personal job or at home or wherever you choose, you can apply his leadership skills. His leadership approach of competence, judgment, and character is so relevant today, more so than ever. His lessons, his principles, nothing theoretical, nothing scientific, simple rules of thumb that he learned and practiced as he went up leading others through his life. Now, again, it can't be denied that he was successful. His subordinates admired him for his skill, his compassion. They trusted him because he had their back. He inspired them to perform with excellence, as is so evident, or was so evident in the Battle of Ia Drang Valley. Not only was he a great leader, he was a great student. He was a great teacher of leadership. And the lessons he passes on in his book certainly apply on the battlefield. They apply in the corporate boardroom. They apply in whatever troop you might be leading with your kids. And they certainly apply in any volunteer firehouse. And as I read this book, I was blown away with the fire service analogies. You know, in most leadership books, there's some fire service lessons and analogies. This book is loaded with them. Even though it's a military book, you can't help but think of how his lessons apply in our volunteer firehouses. And tonight we're going to take a journey and discuss one man's leadership advice and hear his stories and talk about his beliefs and what makes a strong, effective leader, and talk about how these lessons can make us better leaders in our volunteer firehouses and in our volunteer fire service and in the fire service and in your corporate boardroom, your personal life, because you can become a better leader in your own personal occupation and life by the lessons that are in this book. Hal Moore was a warrior, and he writes of his experience gained in a 35-year military career that spanned 3 wars. He battled, and we battle, right? We battle fire, we battle injury, we battle death. We battle bureaucratic organizations with a chain of command to deal with. We battle politics. Now, there are those who think the volunteer fire service is loaded with politics, and it can be. And they think that's the death of the fire service, and they're getting out because of politics. Sit back and ask yourself, what organization isn't? We know from what's going on in our country today that there's politics out there everywhere. There's politics in the Girl Scouts, boys and girls. There's politics in Little League Baseball. There's politics in your hometown school PTA. And it's not all bad. It's learning how to work to achieve your goals. It's learning how to work with others. It's learning how to discuss ideas in a professional manner. Now, there are those who say I failed as a chief, or I failed as a president, or I wasn't a good lieutenant because I wasn't going to kiss anybody's butt. It's not about that either, because you can be a highly respected leader, a leader who still inspires confidence, loyalty, and helps others within their department, but maybe doesn't always agree with the ideas coming across to him or her. And yes, elections are tough in any volunteer department. It's definitely an ugly side of the game, because so many volunteer departments get leadership through elections. But so is promotional structures and moving up in the military and business as well. And you can progress and you can move up and you can lead people effectively and efficiently and professionally without having to aspire to dirty politics or kissing somebody's butt. So sit back tonight and let's look at this professional development offered by the late Lieutenant General Hal Moore, who, by the way, passed away in 2017. See where you fit in. See where you aspire to be. See what you can learn. And as I go through this, be honest with yourself. Then you're going to hear me say it from time to time. Look in the mirror. Where can you get better? Because you know what? We can all get better. And remember, it's never too late to hit that reset button and do a makeover. And again, if anyone would ever like to call in to discuss this, discuss some things that we're talking about, some of the different ideas that Hal Moore shares with us, feel free at 760-454-8852. So Hal Moore sat down and scribbled the outline for his book on a yellow legal pad, over 13,000 words, covering 7 chapters, tracing his evolution as a leader across the different paths his life took him as a career Army officer. His wife typed those scribbled words out into Microsoft Word, and there they sat for years. His wife passed away. The computer they were on actually crashed. Luckily, one of his sons persevered and resurrected the Word document, and this book on leadership was born. Hal Moore was definitely a man who lived by a set of principles that we can learn from. He lived by a code he developed through years of trial and error. He wasn't some perfect leader. He made errors like all of us. We fail as leaders. We fail as officers. We fail as chiefs. We fail as presidents. Don't let your ego get in the way and let you fail to recognize that and admit the mistake and take the steps necessary to correct it. Because he also studied leaders who succeeded and learned from them. And you know what else Hal Moore did? He served under and studied leaders who failed and learned from them as well. Lessons abound in this book, folks. Beginning right away, the very first paragraph, right in the prologue, he says, all of one's life is a learning experience. Folks, then why do so many chiefs and officers stop training, stop learning, stop reading, stop making themselves learn as much about our profession as possible? Why at FDIC do I see so few white helmets in hot classes, or so few officers coming in for the pre-conferences and only going to the trade show and maybe catching an hour class here and there? Back and evaluate what you are doing as an officer and someone who aspires to be a leader. He continues and says, we live in a time when our nation is crying for leadership. I think we'd all agree with that. And remember what I said at the beginning of this podcast? Our fire service is crying for leadership as well, based on the emails, the letters, and the phone calls I'm getting. Be that leader. It's one thing to complain and squabble and talk about what isn't, but you can take the steps necessary to overcome issues and challenges and be the leader that your department needs. For even the first chapter, to outline the challenge of leadership. And in Hal Moore's opinion, leadership is to inspire people to work hard and execute tasks willingly. Key word there, willingly. Does that relate to our volunteer fire service? Because, yes, we can order people to do things and demand that they do things because I've got the trumpets on my collar, or I'm the president, or I'm the commissioner. But you know what? In the volunteer fire service, after a while, that's going to grow old and tiresome. We want to encourage our people to do things willingly, and we'll talk about that. He goes on to say, successful leaders live by a code, a strong set of principles. And in his opinion, a successful leader demonstrates three things. They must be competent, they must exercise good judgment, and they must have character. And we will talk about that. A leader must exercise good judgment and have character. Now, we know a lot of people who are competent, a lot of people who know how to handle saws and tools and maybe are a great firefighter or great on the JAWS or perfect EMS provider. But if they don't have character, if they don't exercise good judgment, there can be flaws, can't there? We see that in our volunteer firehouses from time to time, do we not? He points out that, heck, look at some of the greatest leadership failures of the past 100 years. He talks about in 2001 how the chief executives of Enron were exposed for their massive accounting fraud, led to the company's demise. Now, those leaders were among the most competent business leaders in the world, but they failed in their judgment, and it led to their company's demise. Don't fail in your judgment or competence. Develop competence because it'll help you be a better leader. So Hal Moore talks about how a leader can contaminate his environment and his people by his attitude and his actions, or he can inspire confidence. You inspire competence by having competence, good judgment, and character. At the very beginning of the book, he goes through some of his basic principles on leadership. A leader must be visible to the people he leads, must be self-confident and maintain a positive attitude, must never give off any hint or evidence that he is uncertain of anything other than a positive outcome. He sets the tone and attitude for his people, and his behavior, poise, appearance, vision, and demeanor, all of that reflects the person within the leader. And I think we can learn from that. We can't hide in our office. We can't hide from our people. A leader needs to be out among our people. Volunteer fire officers, be visible to your people. And don't contaminate the room with negativeness, with a poor attitude, because it's infectious. You set the tone and attitude for your people. Look professional. He talks quite a bit about a leader dressing and looking professional, and he's huge on physical fitness and taking care of yourself, because you either radiate confidence and competence and professionalism, or you don't. And the leader must know his primary challenges and how those challenges might impact his command or his unit. The smart leader, the smart officer, should always think through the what-ifs and have a plan on how to handle them before they occur. Hey, if you're a volunteer fire officer and you get denied for a plan or a project, Chief, if you're not getting that truck that you want or that piece of equipment, think of arguments to support it, and think of things that people may say against it before the arguments are made. And even if the what-ifs never happen, if everything sails through, you're still better prepared. If something's denied, you can't simply throw a tantrum. That's not how things work. Smart leaders think through the what-ifs, and they have a plan on how to get a handle on those what-ifs or those objections before they occur. Now, Moore right away identified how complacency kills. When nothing is wrong, he says there's nothing wrong, except there's nothing wrong, and that's when a leader has to be most alert. In the volunteer fire service, the longer it's been since your last major emergency, your last fire, the closer you are to your next fire. How do we get ready? We train to be as prepared and as possible as we can. Now, Moore right away talked about how his childhood development helped guide him and make him into the leader he became. He grew up during the Great Depression, had to work various jobs just to put a few cents in his pocket. He had to take all sorts of odd jobs. You know what he learned from that, which we can apply to our wonderful volunteer fire service? No job is ever beneath you. Whatever you do, do it to the best of your ability. Now, as a volunteer fire officer, you're going to be assigned miscellaneous duties. You're going to be assigned miscellaneous tasks. It's part of the job. You might not like them. You might not do a good job the first or the second time. Or you can do the right thing, and that's immerse yourself into it, learn as much as you can about what the job requires, and really take ownership in it. But here's where another problem comes in. Sometimes we're all fired up. We take that job. We put our heart and soul into it. And then we realize, because we have to do it, say, every month. Let's say it's our truck check-in. In your department, you do it once a month, and you really do a good job at it. After the third or fourth time, you're in about 5 or 6 months now, or so you've done it 4 or 5 times, and now you're starting to take shortcuts. Or, worse, not doing the job at all. You're failing yourself. You're failing as a leader. Because even if you don't like the job, it's important to learn about it, immerse yourself into it, and take it as serious as you can. Whether it's a rig check, an SCBA check, whether you're in charge of the EMS supplies, I remember when I first became an assistant chief, one of my first jobs was to take charge of our hazmat equipment. I got to admit, moving up the ranks as a lieutenant and a captain, I did not know much about hazmat other than the awareness training we've had and been on a few leaks and spills, but I wasn't the most well-versed in it. That wasn't the fun, glamorous job of being an engine operator and going into a fire or up on a roof and cutting holes in a roof or being in charge of the heavy equipment. I was in charge of pads and booms and paste and putty. And I didn't know one kit from the other in our supply room, but you know what? As our second assistant chief, I was in charge of it. What did I do? I rolled my sleeves up. I emptied that room. I went through every kit. And what I didn't know, I wasn't afraid to ask for help. I would go to those that knew. I would go to the previous chief, the previous officers that were in charge of it. Hey, tell me a little bit about this. Why do we carry it? Some of the stuff it was important to check up on a regular basis because in the case of putty, it would dry out. If I wasn't doing my job and we needed that putty down the road, it might have had some dried up putty. And how embarrassing, how unprofessional is that? No job is beneath you. Take it seriously. Learn as much about it as possible, whatever the role is, whatever that job is in your volunteer fire department, and do the job effectively and with continuity. The sign of a good leader is doing the jobs consistently. I'm sorry, but it is. It's a sign of a good leader. Do the job effectively and consistently. Learn about it. Nothing wrong with not knowing when you're assigned or delegated a task, but learn about it because now you're becoming more competent as well. You know, he talked about how his home life and his mom and dad, they were a typical family. Not perfect, but nonetheless a family still. You know, and he used those lessons of a good, strong family upbringing as he went through life. And as he became more and more involved in the military and took on greater roles, one thing he realized was it's important to create a family environment within his organization. He strove to make his subordinates feel that they were valued, that they were members of the team. And he found that the highly functioning subordinate officers were the ones who felt that the leadership is fair and their teammates have their back. Folks, in the volunteer fire service, that's fair and consistent leadership. And to do that, the first person you have to lead and discipline is yourself. Look in the mirror. Where can you get better? Read, educate, and make yourself better. Make yourself in better shape. All of that plays in the role of a good leader. Right away, he learned the value of education. Back to the book, he says to be a leader, you must be willing to be a lifelong learner. He realized the importance of studying not just the craft of being in the Army and in the military, but what's going on in the world. But he said a good leader is a lifelong learner who continually studies to perfect his craft. Does that apply to the volunteer fire service, folks? I think so. Because the leaders who fail are the ones who think they know everything, or they have nothing left to learn. Well, I've been in the fire hall now for 10 years. I've been going to drill for a couple of years. I don't need to go to drill anymore. I've been doing it for 10 years. I'm an officer now, or I'm a chief officer now. I don't have to go down the dark, smoky hallway to be with my troops. I don't have to go to that FDIC hot class smokehouse drill. I don't have to practice donning and donning an air pack. Ditch the ego. You can always get better. You can always learn. And people look up to leaders that are there with them doing the job. Chiefs and officers, I understand sometimes you're going to be in the office. You've got other responsibilities. We totally get that. I'm talking common sense here. You're better off more often than not being out with the troops when you can, immersing yourself in the things that they're doing. Because you know what? You can always get better. Nothing's better than muscle memory. There's nothing better than doing things over and over again. So for the fourth time on this podcast, I say ditch the ego and understand that you can learn and always get better. And Moore always was interested in leadership. So, of course, he read about leadership, military, business, political leaders. He read about what made them successful. And if you're listening, don't you want to be successful? Don't you want to, and again, you don't have to be an officer. Don't you want to be a successful leader, even if you're a firefighter? Then why not learn from the people who have done it and been successful, like Hal Moore? Why not hit that reset button? Why not hit that reset button and start over? And along with that, recognize that a good leader is also a good listener. Hal Moore spent a lot of time listening to his people. Keep your mouth shut and listen to your people, is what Hal Moore said. Because when you listen, you know twice as much as the other guy or gal. What he knows or she knows, you now know. So in the volunteer fire service, step back every now and then and listen to your people. Even if it's something that, you know what, you know you're not going to do. Somebody comes up to you with an idea, suggestion, and in your mind you're thinking, oh my God. And this happens all the time, and I know anyone listening out there, especially chief officers and people in high rank or former chiefs, know what I'm talking about here. People come up with all sorts of ideas, don't they? And sometimes in your mind you're thinking, oh my God, this guy's crazy or this girl's nuts. I'm not going to ever do that. Don't say it. Don't give off body language like that. Listen, observe, or reflect, digest the idea, and even if you're not going to do it, say it nicely, because their next idea might be a great idea. And if you demotivate someone, we're never going to do that, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard, you might have just demotivated somebody that next time would have had a great idea. You're not inspiring your people that way. And they're watching your voice, they're watching your mannerisms. They're listening to your voice inflection. So being a good leader is being a good listener. Being a good leader is being able to digest ideas, and if you're not agreeing with them, to learn how to say no. There's nothing wrong with saying no. It's how you say no. Because people watch, and if you're not doing it correctly in our volunteer firehouses, you're demotivating people. Moore used to carry little notes around in their little note cards, and he would type notes and come up with ideas. And, you know, we got a lot on our plate, don't we, in the volunteer fire service? Don't we? A lot on our plate. And you ever had that idea pop in your mind, I'm going to do this at the next drill, or, oh, I got to remember to talk about this at the next meeting, and then you forget. Well, Moore used to keep a little notepad in his pocket, and he was always jotting down notes. You know who else did that? Alan Brunacini. Alan Brunacini, the late great chief out of Phoenix, who we lost back in October, one of the most wonderful fire chiefs ever to exist, used to keep little index cards, I believe, in his pocket, right in his front shirt pocket to write ideas down. Not a bad idea. I forget everything if I don't write it down. When I was chief, I used to keep notes in before the, remember the Palm Pilot? I used to have a Palm Pilot. Before that, it was a sheet of paper, but I used to keep notes in there and put people's names with what I needed to remind myself to ask them if they were working on projects. But whatever works for you, do it. We have smartphones today, right? Write your notes down on the smartphone so you don't forget ideas, or don't forget things you're tasked to do. That's another important part of being a good officer in the volunteer fire service is consistency, as we talked about, follow-through. Now, if you're supposed to get something done by a certain time, get it done. I forgot. How'd you forget? Well, I forgot. Write it down. Put it in your phone. Put a calendar reminder on it. It's all part of being a good officer. Sometimes people ask you something and you tell them you're going to get back to them. If you don't get back to them, you're not inspiring confidence. You're not exercising and showing good leadership. Put it in your phone. Even if somebody comes up with an idea and you say, I'm going to think about it, and you know you're not going to do it, you still owe them an answer. Get back to them. You don't get back to people, after a while they forget about you. After a while, they're not coming to you. After a while, they're totally disregarding your leadership because it's not existing. galore in Hal Moore's book on leadership, Winning When Outgunned and Outmanned. He goes off to West Point. He was lucky enough to get into West Point. And you know what he met there? His first exposure to toxic leadership. He had a couple squad leaders, and they would alternate different months leading his squad. And boy, were they completely different, Moore says. One was toxic, and one was inspiring. Both of them would have a lasting impact on Hal Moore's style of leadership. He writes in the book that he's never forgotten any of those two. That first one was arrogant, sadistic, screamed, and yelled. I bet some of you can think of people like that. He had just a man who was despised. And for as long as humans have been on Earth, every organization has had what he calls toxic leaders. And you know what Moore says? You know what? Throughout your life, you're probably going to serve under more bad leaders than good leaders. But here's the learning lesson that we can apply to our volunteer firehouse and anywhere in our life. You can learn as much from a bad leader as you can from a good leader. Toxic leaders are everywhere, but so are good leaders. Toxic leaders will expose you and make a perfect example of what not to do. Heck, Rick Lasky talks about when he was exposed to some bad leaders. Remember last month he talked about he was exposed to a bad leader, and he was thinking about taking a fire chief's job out of state, and he was given some very good advice, and that advice simply was, when you have to make a decision, think of what that toxic leader would have done and do the opposite. And Rick Lasky said it never was wrong. Never, ever was wrong. A leader should never be arrogant, spiteful, condescending. To the contrary, he should always act with humility and treat his subordinates with respect and dignity, Moore writes. As a leader, your words and your actions have a greater impact on your subordinates than you realize. Choose those words carefully. Just like I said, if you're going to let somebody down because maybe you don't want to follow through with their idea, do it carefully. Avoid sarcasm. Avoid flippancy. Do not insult or take digs at anyone's intelligence. And don't automatically assume that someone is stupid or indifferent because they haven't mastered a particular task yet. Boy, can we learn from that in our volunteer firehouses, can't we? Our people come in all shapes, sizes, learning curves, education levels, life experiences. You as a leader, don't be arrogant and spiteful to them. Ditch the ego, because your words and your actions will have a great impact on them. Make it a good, solid impact. You know, sarcasm's tough. You think you're kidding, but to the person on the other end, you know, they might not interpret that way. You know, nice to see you at the call last night, Joe. Hey, thanks for coming to the drill, Jane. You know, you think you're kidding, but you might not know that they were working a double shift. Something happened at home with one of their children. And it can be very insulting to that member who was your target of your sarcastic fun. So remember that. Early in the book here, page 18, continuing on with Hal Moore's lessons that he learned right away at West Point, is one of the benchmark leadership lessons that I put on Facebook a month or so ago. And I would like anyone who doesn't agree with this to call me immediately. Contrary to popular belief, yelling at and berating your subordinates will not make them move faster, nor will it inspire their loyalty. In fact, it may encourage them to begin plotting your demise. Many years from now, your subordinates are not going to remember what deadlines were met, what sales were closed, or what products were shipped. What they will remember is how you, the leader, treated them. Whether you inspired a climate of trust and dignity, or you ruled through fear, metrics, and intimidation. Wow. Wow. As it relates to the volunteer fire service. Hit the reset button. Look in the mirror. Where do you fall in this lesson? Contrary to popular belief, yelling at and berating your subordinates will not make them move faster, nor will it inspire their loyalty. In fact, it may encourage them to begin plotting your demise. Where do we have our demise? Oh, those terrible fire department elections. Right? How are we treating our people? Lots of lessons to be learned right here at West Point. Moore continued through West Point and actually was inspired by something that was almost 100. The military does such a good job at developing leaders, and Moore drew inspiration from a monologue that was titled Schofield's Definition of Discipline. It's part of West Point's lore. Every cadet was required to memorize it, and it came from Major John Schofield, who was a Civil War veteran. He was also a West Point graduate. And Schofield said the discipline which makes the soldiers of a free country reliable in battle is not to be gained by harsh or tyrannical treatment. On the contrary, such treatment is far more likely to destroy than to make an army. Creating a professional fire department, or are we destroying it because of the way we're treating and leading our members? Is it time to hit that reset button? The toxic leadership Moore was to talk about, I'm sure you can see in just about any organization you've been involved with, especially the Volunteer Fire Service. Moore talks about toxic leaders that he names different brands, such as bully leaders who inflict emotional pain, deliver threats, narcissistic leaders, they're arrogant and self-congratulatory. Did you see me at that call? Did I do a great job? Divisive leaders. Many of the same qualities of the narcissistic leader, but they channel their wrath and their arrogance toward one person, maybe one group, who they perceive as weak or unfit. Insular leaders, they form cliques and they go to great lengths to ensure that they have followers, or I got to get those votes. Hypocritical leaders, of course, we know, do as I say, not as I do. Another great leadership lesson. Don't ever ask your people to do something you are not willing to do yourself. Don't hold people to a standard that doesn't apply to you. Now, Moore's second squad leader, the one who took over the squad after the toxic leader, he was the exact opposite. He was stern and demanding, but he allowed no second-rate performances. But you know what? He had a calm, commanding, and forceful personality. He required and got the best out of all of us. His very presence was projected around him, and he placed great emphasis on the West Point Honor Code. What's your honor code? West Point motto, duty, honor, country. How about pride, honor, and integrity for the fire service? Just a great book. A leader, back to the book, as a leader of any stripe, let's say as a leader in the fire service with any speaking trumpet, you simply cannot give orders and expect your subordinates to follow them blindly. To the contrary, you must establish a clear intent. He calls that addressing the why. And the desired end state. It will never suffice as a leader to say, because I said so, as a reason for performing a task. Explain the why. Now on the fire ground, and he goes on to say, yes, in the middle of a battle, there's no time maybe to explain the why, but so many times as leaders, we're involved in non-hectic situations where we're changing things, and we need to communicate it clearly, and we need to communicate the why. That's where building the trust comes in. Then when you do need, in the hectic situation at a fire, to give an order quickly without being questioned, it'll get carried out without any questions being asked. But when you can, we need to explain the why. Why are we changing this bylaw? Why are we changing from this type helmet to this type helmet? Because I said so. Doesn't wash. Doesn't wash. as he was at West Point. Now remember, World War II was raging during his years at West Point. He learned the importance of staying on top of world events and how those world events would affect him or his classmates. He talks about on page 25 how a good leader stays informed of current events and why it's so important to stay on top of world events, and how a leader should anticipate challenges based on those events. Volunteer Fire Service, are we staying on top of what's going on in our little world or in your area? Are we anticipating upcoming challenges based on what we're learning about, what we're witnessing, be it funds, be it political climate, be it building construction? Are we seeing lessons learned from truss roof failures of years ago, so we're out in our district documenting where these trusses are being built and noting it and passing it on to the next generation and explaining to them the lessons learned where firefighters were killed and hurt? That's being a good leader and staying on top of things and current events in your area. Now, West Point also exposed Moore to some other nasty things such as racism and bigotry. Remember, it was the 1940s. And when attempts were made at one time to forbid some black classmates from attending the company picnic, Moore stood up. He took a stand. And he announced he would boycott the picnic and other events if that was to happen. Back to the book. A good leader never discriminates or alienates based on race, color, or other genetic factors. Hal Moore learning this lesson in the 1940s, a lesson that volunteer fire officers and leaders in any organization should embrace wholeheartedly. It's 2018, people. Our volunteer firehouses cannot tolerate bullying, harassment. Don't judge what people are doing on their personal time. Yes, we can still mold them into firefighters and establish our organizational beliefs, our organizational expectations of them as firefighters, but we need to exhibit good organizational behavior. And leaders understand what is off limits, what is not tolerated, and we exhibit good organizational behavior. It's 2018. Bullying, harassment have no place in the volunteer firehouse. Yes, certainly, folks, probie chores and expectations are certainly okay. It's how it's done. There have been cases over the last few years in volunteer firehouses where people have been assaulted, criminal charges have been lodged, and as a leader, we need to be on the lookout and intervene when necessary, but demonstrate most and foremost by your own personal example. So he missed combat in World War II because he graduated from West Point as the war wound down. And 6 weeks after the war ended, Hal Moore was off to Japan. 6 weeks at the conclusion of World War II, he's off to Japan. Now, Japan just lost a major war. They signed an unconditional surrender. They had no power. They had nothing. They just had a nuclear bomb dropped on them. And here comes the U.S. Army and Hal Moore not knowing what to expect, knowing how they were going to be treated. And boy, did the Japanese make a lasting impact on him. Did the Japanese exhibit another tidbit of character that we can apply to our volunteer fire service? Even in the midst of defeat, the Japanese carried themselves professionally and they maintained their discipline. And he writes, that is the quickest way toward recovery. Chiefs, officers, presidents, if you get turned down for a purchase, if that bylaw you proposed didn't pass, if you lose an election, best thing you can do is maintain your discipline. Sulking and complaining, bitching and whining, that doesn't impress anybody. Disappearing for 6 months or a year doesn't impress anybody. Understand you're not feeling well. You work for something and you didn't get it. As Jocko, the great Navy SEAL, says, best thing to do then is go to the gym. Work it off. Sulking doesn't solve anything. Disappearing doesn't solve anything. Work harder. The world's full of the cemeteries are full of irreplaceable people. You disappearing isn't going to hurt anything. There's always someone else. But show yourself as a true leader by overcoming and working hard. He took over a platoon of parachutists, and many of them were combat-hardened veterans with years of experience. He comes out of West Point, and he's their commander now. You think he could learn from that? He could succeed or he could fall flat on his face. Here he comes over to Japan, takes over this outfit that's filled with battle-hardened veterans, and he's in charge. Hal Moore says, when in charge, take charge. But treat your subordinates with respect, dignity, and common courtesy. You take over an outfit, and there's always somebody who's a little smarter than you. There's always someone that was in your shoes years ago. You know, being a leader or taking over a fire department doesn't mean you're instantly the smartest person in the room. You know, everyone has unique talents and perspectives. They all bring to an organization. As Hal Moore writes, good leaders utilize those talents. They utilize the talents of those around them. They seek counsel from those with more experience. And again, how many times have you heard this tonight? They treat them with respect. Leaders sometimes forget that respect is a two-way street. If you give respect, you'll get it in return. Back to the book, no one deserves respect until they earn it. However, everyone gets respect until they do something to lose it. Interesting. Give courtesy to those around you. Don't be afraid to pick the brains of those that have been there before you, especially in our volunteer fire outfits where we have so many past chiefs and officers and senior members in our rooms, right? If you have something to add, something to say, as a reminder, you can call in at 760-454-8852. It's Fire Engineering, Blog Talk Radio. Tonight's installment, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. I am Tom Merrill, and I'm glad to have you with me tonight talking about leadership, reviewing Lieutenant General Hal Moore's book, Hal Moore on Leadership, Winning When Outgunned and Outmanned. I hope you agree with me at this point about the leadership lessons he learned while being a combat military officer, but how we can apply them to our professional volunteer fire organizations, how we can hit that reset button, it's never too late to become the leader you want to be. Hal Moore took over some outfits that maybe weren't performing that well. Maybe you're taking over a department that's had some hard times. Maybe you're taking over a crew that hasn't been performing that well. Back to the book. A worker's performance often reflects the attitude of his leadership. Thus, if you treat your subordinates like dirt, that's exactly how they will perform like dirt. You don't motivate people by insulting them. You don't inspire people by talking down to them. As a leader, you'd be surprised how easily you can motivate your subordinates with a little common courtesy. When setting the tone for your organization, follow the rules of thumb that he puts down. If you want something done, ask nicely. Again, volunteer fire service, you're not putting food on anyone's table. If a subordinate forgets to perform a task, don't take it personally. Just remind them nicely. Every organization has a to-do list, and while juggling those tasks, some things will inevitably fall through the cracks. When it happens, don't assume that subordinate is lazy or stupid. Re-engage them on the task, and if necessary, emphasize why it's a priority. Hey, Lou, I didn't see you didn't check off the SCBAs for the month of February. Yeah, I know, Chief. I'm sorry. I got busy. My wife ended up taking extra hours, or my husband was working extra hours, and I just didn't get to the firehouse. Okay. See if you can have someone cover for you, but we need to make sure they're done so they're ready to go. Yeah, I'm on it. Okay. Just want to make sure you understand how important it is that these get done in a timely manner. You see how we can apply that to our volunteer fire service? The leader, says Moore, sets the tone and attitude of his people. If you're hulking around the firehouse, miserable and yelling at people, don't be surprised when they act that way or treat our customers that way. Leaders should be positive. They should be inspirational. It's hard. None of this is easy. You could be having a bad day at the office. You could be having a bad day at the home front. And now you got to go to the firehouse and be inspirational? Comes with the paycheck. I say that kiddingly. But people react better with positive leaders than they do with negative leaders. Inspire your people. Remember, your outfit's attitude reflects the leadership. So, do you want negativity in your volunteer firehouse? Now, the officer he served under in Japan the longest was a Major Mansfield. And he talks a lot about Major Mansfield in this book about his service in Japan. When Mansfield gave me a task, he would tell me clearly what he wanted done. He would specify his standards, and then he would turn me loose. But he would check up on me now and again. He never told me how to do anything. He just told me to get it done. Remember when I said earlier, too, as a leader, you can assign people to do things, and then we've all seen leaders that totally forget what they've even got people doing. A good leader does check up on his people, doesn't micromanage, tells them, hey, our fire prevention's coming up. Make sure, Lieutenant and Captain, you order those coloring books and helmets by the end of August so they're in by October. Now, if September 1st comes and I don't see them anywhere, something's got to be in my little checklist to say, did you remind them? Did you check up on it? For me, I had notes, and later on I had reminders in my phone that would beep to say, hey, fire prevention supplies come in. And you're not doing it negatively. Hey, did you order those supplies yet? No. Hey, Lieutenant, did the helmets come in yet? Oh, yeah, Chief. I got the packing slip. I put it on your desk. Okay, great. Or, hey, no, I got the shipping acknowledgement. They're on their way. What's the worst that's going to happen? Oh, I forgot. Remind them, trusting you to get this done. It's important that it get done. Hal Moore was quite a guy. He was quite a guy. If a subordinate performs a task and the outcome is not what you expect, don't attack their intelligence or their character. Politely explain the deficiency and offer an idea for the solution, because subordinates will quickly lose respect for any leader who is all problem with no solution. What do you mean you didn't order these helmets? What do you mean blah, 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 and yelling and screaming? Let's sit down and figure out why this happened so it doesn't happen again. People don't want problems thrown their way. They want solutions. Leaders don't want problems thrown their way. They want solutions. So work together to come up with those solutions. Major Mansfield was always cool. He communicated clearly, specified standards, and then he set his people loose. And you know what that inspired Moore to do? He didn't want Mansfield to lose his trust, and he didn't want to fail him. So if you could pass on a benchmark for a new officer, that's it. It's so basic, but yet it's so important. Give people what you want them to do, and don't raise your voice. Hal Moore on leadership. Lessons for all of it. And if there are bad results, don't blame the subordinates for bad results. It all rests with the leader. That's also called extreme ownership. Jocko Willink, the famous Navy SEAL, wrote the book Extreme Ownership. That's what that's all about. It all rests with the officer. Remember, there's no bad soldiers. There's only bad officers. Don't blame subordinates for bad results. Everything rests with the leader. He also talks about the importance of training. See that your members are properly trained. How does that apply in the volunteer fire service? Train and be prepared. motivate and inspire your people to be as prepared as possible? If they fail, you blame yourself for not training them and not properly preparing them or giving them poor instructions. We're looking in the mirror. We have a failure. We're looking in the mirror. It's me, the leader. I did something wrong. I had a bad drill. I didn't prepare them properly. We had a bad house fire here, and we had the hose line all screwed up and kinks and didn't have a good stretch. It's me. It's the leader. I haven't spent enough time on the drill ground properly preparing them. When they do succeed, make sure you praise them. Push praise down. It's not the leader that was successful. It was the troops. It was your members that did a good job. While in Japan, he learned the importance of keeping his people informed. He found it so important to tell people what's going on in the organization, what's coming up, what are the hot issues, what aren't the hot issues. You think that's huge in the volunteer fire service? Oh, undoubtedly so. Because if you're not informing them, if you're not having open lines of communication, what are people doing? They're going to make up the information. They're going to gossip. A good leader keeps his people informed, lets them know what's going on. Hey, I heard we're going to be getting rid of Engine 3. That's really too bad. It's only 10 years old. If that's the plan, Chief, talk about it. We're exploring possibly getting rid of Engine 3. We haven't made a decision yet. And here's why. We're explaining the why now. Here's why. It needs some engine work that's going to cost a lot of money, and we're looking at options of would it be cheaper in the long run to replace it now. Be open. And even if it's something slightly controversial, even if it's something in the public that's controversial, we're aware of these accusations. It's not what we stand for if they prove to be true, and if they do prove to be true, we will take action accordingly. But if you try to hide, if you try to bury things, if you try to hide it under the carpet, or at worst, try not to employ open lines of communication, then we're going to have trouble. Then people are going to talk. Then gossip is going to happen. And we all hate gossip, don't we? Get out in front of it. Nip it in the bud. Chief, leader, commissioner, president, firefighter, get out in front of it. Be open, be honest, be fair. Hal Moore employed these and is known as one of the most successful officers to serve. There's going to be hiccups and catastrophes in organizations. Hal Moore talks about that. There's going to be things that happen. Back to the book. In any profession or organization, there are bound to be some hiccups and catastrophes or close calls with disaster. Don't let them break your stride or derail you psychologically from achieving what you want to achieve. At times, life will hit you hard. It'll teach you lessons that you have no desire to learn. But when the hits and setbacks come, a leader simply picks himself up and keeps moving forward. In our volunteer fire service, that's pretty obvious when that happens, right? When that happens, we have to pick ourselves up and keep moving forward. Could be that bad call, could be that bad drill, could be the bad monthly meeting. A leader brushes themselves off and move forward. And God, could that be hard if we had a horrific injury or death? No doubt about it. And Hal Moore details lots of that in the book and how he had to pick himself up and move forward. But he took some solace in the fact that at least his people were well trained. They were as prepared as they possibly could be. They knew what they were doing. They knew the challenges that they faced could lead to death. And there's an analogy there with our service, because sometimes we pay the ultimate sacrifice as well. But as a leader, don't you want to know that you were taking as good, best care possible for your crew? If you're the lieutenant in charge of that crew, or the chief in charge of that department, don't you want to take solace in the fact that you did what you could do to be as prepared as possible? Praise often, praise in public, punish in private. Boy, we hear that a lot, don't we? That's another cardinal rule of leadership that we seem to break all the time, isn't it? Some of us love to blow up at firefighters out on the training ground or in the apparatus bay. Some presidents love to scream at a meeting. Some board of directors love to lead by fear and intimidation, and in a group setting, embarrass people and yell. And if things are going well, let people know in a nice public setting. Good job. Did you see what the crew of Engine 32 did? Somebody's not having a good day? Pull them into the office. You know what I used to do? Because it seems in a volunteer firehouse, everyone knows if somebody gets called to the office of the president or the chief or the commissioner, that something's not right because you're not saying it in front of everyone. So I used to try to avoid, hey, Joe, come here to my office. Everyone would be like, uh-oh, what did Joe do now? Oh, no, Joe's, right? And it'd go like wildfire through the organization. Joe's going to the chief's office, blah, blah. And in the volunteer firehouse, you may not see Joe for another week, so you had to do it then and there. So I came up with something that worked well for me. Now I'm probably giving my secret away, but in a volunteer firehouse, we wear different hats, and one of the things I would do is I would say to Joe, hey, Joe, I've got that paperwork we needed to sign for that class you're taking. Come on over to my office. We'll sign it. People didn't even bat an eye then. Hey, Joe, I got that application you wanted to fill out for change your beneficiary for your insurance or something simple like that. No one would even bat an eye. Then I would get Joe over to the office, and I'd be able to talk to him then about what was on my mind without anyone even knowing that it was something more serious than that. I think that's important in the volunteer firehouse because, again, understand what I'm saying, that I need to talk to Joe because he really screwed up or something really bad happened. I don't want to do it in front of anybody, rightfully so. But if I say, Joe, report to the chief's office over the PA system, or go find him out in the apparatus bay when there's 20 other firefighters out there, Joe, and give him the finger to come to me, people are all like, oh, he's in trouble. But if I just nonchalantly say, hey, Joe, come here, I got that paperwork we were talking about. I need you to sign it. No one even bats an eye, and now I can go and talk to Joe. Praise in public, punish in private. One of the most broken rules of leadership. Moore goes off to the Korean War in 1952. He's exposed to combat, spent 13 months over in Korea. Again, he took over an outfit that had a really bad leader. They had a lot of issues, and it would be easy to fall into the yelling and screaming and telling everyone that they're bad. And the lesson that he passes on from this experience is just because the leadership is bad doesn't mean the troops are bad. Don't let a bad officer reflect on his troops. So if you're in the volunteer fire service, you may have a bad chief next door, bad neighboring chief, bad officer next door, or you're a lieutenant or a captain taking over an engine crew or a ladder crew that maybe hasn't been performing well. Doesn't mean the entire company is bad. Matter of fact, he says, if given a choice between taking over a good outfit or a bad outfit, I'll choose the bad outfit every time because they have nowhere to go but up. So heck, if you're taking over a department, or how about an office in your personal life that's had issues? It's got nowhere to go but up. Pick it up. Maybe as an executive officer, administrative officer in your department, you're taking over the secretary's job, and the previous secretary was horrible. Well, pick it up. He says there's two things an officer can do in those situations. He can either contaminate his environment with his attitude and his actions, or he can inspire confidence. Take over that secretary's job, and you can continue the poor line of doing the minutes, or if you're the treasurer and the reports are falling apart and the auditors are looking for, your audits and they're not done, that's going to reflect on you. So contaminate the environment by continuing on with the same poor course that it's been on, or inspire confidence by doing a good job, immersing yourself in that job. One way he inspired confidence was he took over this bad outfit The officers were in a nice barracks, and the troops were in a rodent-infested bunker, and he swapped them. He moved his officers into the rodent-infested bunker and put his troops into the better bunkers. He showed simple acts of compassion to these troops, and right away that strengthened Hal Moore's power tenfold. Back to the book, because once his men realized he cared for them and he had their welfare, the company's morale skyrocketed and their performance. He took care of the troops. Back to the book, put the welfare of your troops above your own. They eat before you eat. They sleep before you sleep. You know, one of the best ways to do that is after a fire department drill, or maybe even after a big call. If you're having food down at the firehouse afterwards, the firefighters should eat first. Firefighters' welfare comes before a leader's welfare. Commanders are appointed and leaders are unofficially elected by the troops. Yeah, I'd say that's true. Commanders might be elected instead of maybe appointed, but a leader can be elected unofficially by the troops under them just by their actions. These actions we're talking about tonight. You know, Moore writes something here in the book that is so true in our volunteer fire outfits, and you know what? We have a hard time accepting this sometimes in the volunteer fire service when we're elected into an officer position. Back to the book, every leader is put through an informal process in the first few weeks wherein his people judge him and decide whether or not he is worthy of their trust. He must earn that trust. How? A leader must prove himself by his actions, appearance, demeanor, attitude, and decisions. So, how do we do that? First of all, understand that people are watching you. When you're an officer, everything you do, every word you utter, is watched and reflected upon. Is it positive or negative? Do you speak highly of your department or poorly of your department? How do you dress? Do you go to calls with excitement and passion? No, it doesn't mean you're yelling and screaming, Yahoo! No. But you're positive, you're proficient and efficient with what you do. Do you have a positive attitude? Are you making competent decisions? That's the process you're going to be going through as a leader. Heck, you just got elected back in December. Here we are approaching in the middle of March now. Everything is being watched. As I said, even your dress is watched and your behavior is watched. And like it or not, it impacts not only your reputation as an officer, but it impacts right away your leadership reputation as well. And Moore writes about that. Take care of your people and they will take care of you. A leader proves himself by demonstrating his concern for and relationship with the people under him. All people, by the way. Like I said, our volunteer fire service, we are loaded with all different personalities, all different learning curves, right? All people are worthy of our respect. Now, Moore gets into real combat here in Korea. Think there's some leadership lessons there with his combat? He writes, you either rise to the occasion or you sink fast and quite possibly die and cause the death of others. Does that apply to the volunteer fire service? On leading troops into combat, Moore writes, the leader must be visible on the battlefield. He must be in the battle. He must exhibit determination to prevail no matter what the odds. He must remain calm and cool and show no fear. He must ignore the dust, the noise, the smoke, the explosions, the scream of the wounded, the yells, or the dead lying around him, because that's all normal. Crisis management is not unique to the military, and civilian leaders must show the same characteristics in stressful situations. Volunteer fire leaders should show the same character, same mannerisms in emergency situations. It's called command presence, people. Even if we think we are having trouble, even if we think we're in trouble and we may lose this thing, we really can't show it. We need to exhibit good command presence by not giving off a hint that we're uncertain about a positive outcome. We must ignore all the noise and chaos and commotion around us and not get distracted and focus on the task at hand, just like Moore did in combat. Our combat is fire and emergency scene management. And Moore writes about leaders being killed. Leaders must prepare and train other leaders to step up and take over, because if he is killed, his next in line needs to be able to take over and carry on. How are we doing that in our volunteer firehouses? Are we setting up successful succession management plans? Are we preparing those under us? Are we working that in the drills? Are we laying clear expectations on the roles of firefighters, the roles of lieutenants, the roles of captains and chiefs? And in a lot of volunteer departments we do. Let's go to the administrative side. Mr. President, are you preparing your vice president? Is there a way we can prepare our next treasurer? How many times do hands go up in the air when there's an opening for treasurer and they're looking for nominations? Probably none. Is there things we can do right now in our volunteer firehouses to prepare the next person for that job? We should make plans, put a book together, put a succession management book together that outlines what needs to be done. Bylaws tell you what the qualifications might be or maybe what needs to be done. Doesn't tell you how. Is there a succession management plan in your department for your treasurer, for your secretary, where they can be properly trained? We've had treasurers in my own department take over that never knew how to put a QuickBooks account together. Well, now it's written down so we can pass it on, help them through the steps. As new officers come in, they get a little how-to guide on how to work our software for inventory management for things they need to do. There's things you can do in your volunteer firehouse for those next people coming up to take over, and it's important in any professional fire department to start doing that. Now, Moore obviously is laying it on the line here in much more serious situation where leaders are getting killed, not out of the question per se in our line of work, but we should have a succession management plan in place for all sides of the organization, administrative and firematic. New treasurer comes in. Here's a how-to guide to get into the software. Here's when audits need to be done. Oh, by the way, here's who we call for our audit. Here's our money handling procedures. 2 signatures on a check. Here's the different accounts we have. It's tough to just throw somebody in there. Throw a new secretary in there that doesn't know the first thing about recording minutes or how to enter a new member into your system. Well, Moore, as he watched soldiers getting killed around him, knew that it was important for the continuity of for the U.S. Army to prepare others and train them to be able to take over when called upon. He gained so much experience with so many platoons while he was over in Korea, and he was exposed to something called the us versus them mentality. He took over a company, Company K, that had this culture of divisiveness within the unit, and it created problems between the combat soldiers and the support soldiers. He witnessed firsthand that there was this line between the different involved in a unit, between the cooks and between the support staff, and he saw how that could lead to a problem. And we can have problems in our volunteer fire service as well, can't we? We can have divisiveness between former members, exempt members, social members. If you want to create a team feeling, work together and keep all aspects of your organization informed and in the loop. Treat everybody with respect. Older members and past chiefs and presidents should be welcomed with open arms. So what Moore did is he had all the cooks, he had all the typists, the drivers. He had them all prepared to fight. Then they were soldiers, and they formed a better bond with the other soldiers. And we can do that with our active members. We can do that with all our members, our interior members, our exterior members. And some departments have social or support members. Invite them all to the drill. Have them all work on their specific jobs, their area of responsibilities, what they will do at that big call when it comes in. So people get to know each other. They get to work well together and show them all the respect they deserve. And by doing that, Moore gets into some training highlights in one of his other great lines, be ready so you don't have to get ready. In other words, train, 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 and drill so you don't have to get ready. It could be as simple as you're the treasurer or the secretary. Have your reports ready for the monthly meeting. As an officer, there's always something you can be working on or doing. It might just be your area of responsibility, but there's always something that can be done. It doesn't maybe have to even be a big ticket item, but always think to yourself, what can I be doing to help my organization? If I'm the secretary, do I have the minutes done? If I'm the treasurer, did I do that audit? Did I set up the appointment with the auditor? So I saw at my firehouse an axe sitting in a room for a couple of months. And I'm like, what's this axe? As a commissioner, I was curious. Brand new axe sitting there, and I'm told, oh, that's an axe that we had to replace. We broke one. Okay, well, it's been sitting in the room for a few months. Yeah, the officer's going to put it on the rig when he's got time. Oh, okay, I get it. Time management. Well, months went by, and the axe was still sitting there, so I did some investigating. And one day I saw the officer, and I'm like, why is this axe still sitting here? Oh, I just haven't had a chance to put it on the truck. And I'm thinking, we're at the firehouse because there's a call. They held the rigs in quarters, so we're waiting for them to come back. And we're sitting around talking. Putting the axe on the rig is only going to take 5 minutes. We tape it to reflect the color tape that the rig, each truck has a different color. We put that tape on the handle, and boom, it's on the truck. And when I explained that to the officer, he's like, oh, yeah, I guess I could do it. Simple stuff. Time management. What can I be doing? Be ready so you don't have to get ready. And that certainly made us a little bit better prepared because that truck now had the axe on it. As a firefighter, take a few minutes in the firehouse to make yourself better prepared. Use the time available as a volunteer. Hey, time is what we have the least amount of, doesn't it? You know, you can always be doing something. So he goes off to West Point after Korea, and he begins teaching infantry tactics to the cadets, including, interesting enough, Norman Schwarzkopf, who commanded the coalition forces during the First Gulf War. So he's teaching at Korea, and he realizes that a good leader, a good officer, and I hate to say it, but it's so true, also becomes well-versed in public speaking. And he understands that not everyone is comfortable doing it, and he gives some lessons in the book about how to be a better speaker. You know, rehearsing your talk, read it to yourself, because he understands the first impression a speaker makes on his audience is by his appearance and his demeanor, and are they well-groomed, are they self-confident, are they nervous? But the most important lesson is leaders need to be carefully prepared when they're going to give a lesson. And oh my gosh, can we apply that in our volunteer firehouse? First of all, understand you may have to talk in front of a public group. Second of all, understand you most definitely will have to talk in front of your constituents. So try to get comfortable doing it. And while teaching and mentoring, he heard lots of complaining and griping, and he still was a relatively young officer. He was still a junior officer at the time, and he sometimes would take those gripes to his superiors. That was a big mistake. Leaders at West Point told him that he wanted solutions, not problems. So bring solutions to your chief, bring solutions to your president, bring solutions to your commissioners. Don't just bring problems. Help solve those problems. And he keeps reinforcing how at West Point he had to be prepared to teach and prepare lesson plans. In our volunteer fire service, so many times I hear complaints about our drill issues and problems and not being prepared, and officers that are putting things together at the last minute. If our people are taking the time to attend drill, we owe them well-prepared, well-rehearsed drills. Yes, it takes time. Remember I said as an officer there's things you should be doing. Why not work right now on your drill topic for next year? Why not start working on that drill you're going to offer next fall? Why not start planning fire prevention open house? One fire department I know of didn't have quite a very successful open house. They did something every year where the public came in. They had some issues. They had some problems. Not uncommon. It happens. And they were determined back in October, we are going to meet and have a committee meeting within a month of the open house, and we're going to plan out next year's open house. It's March 13th. They have not met yet. Understand time management is so important. Our biggest challenge in the volunteer fire service is time. There's never enough time. Make the most of the time. Remember what you said you're going to do and do it. Rehearse that drill. Prepare that drill. Prepare that drill not the week before, the year before. There's nothing wrong with that. And bring solutions to the boss. He went to a lot of meetings as he was working up the chain of command. He has some great lessons in this book about running a good meeting, because too often he saw officers who failed to move a meeting along, or worse, failed to come up with any logical plan to handle an issue. In the volunteer fire service, sometimes we have yelling and screaming at meetings about certain issues, or maybe we discuss the issue calmly, but at the end of the discussion, no clear consensus is ever reached as to what we're going to do, or worse, who's going to do it. You ever had it where you spend a meeting talking about something, and at the end of the meeting, there's really no one assigned to do it, so you move on to the next subject, and 3 months down the road, you're arguing or discussing the same thing again? So as Moore points out in the book, you can control any meeting with a carefully designed agenda. Discuss, decide, delegate. Ensure things are getting done. And remember, next meeting, follow up. How are we making out on Plan A? Be prepared, because nobody likes an unorganized meeting. And they hate it when you leave and nothing gets done or accomplished or delegated. And Moore leaves West Point in June of 1964. He's given command of the 2nd Battalion, 23rd Infantry, and prepares to head off to Vietnam. And now he's taken over an organization, more men. Very important leadership lesson he can pass on to us here, people, is when taking over an organization, you've got to stand out in front of your people and state clearly what your goals, what your objectives are, what you expect from them, and what they can expect from you. Chiefs, presidents, you have to do this. You have to tell your people what your organization's goal is. Captains, lieutenants, you need to do it for a drill. As a leader, you must have clearly defined objectives. And you must ensure that the objectives are understood by your subordinate leaders. He talks about decision-making and how sometimes you have to make decisions and allow your subordinates, I should say, to make decisions. Sometimes in the volunteer fire service, we have officers that don't let subordinates make decisions, or subordinates become afraid to make decisions because they might get yelled at. They might make the wrong decision. And it's important, as Moore outlines in this book, for leaders, and in our case, for our chiefs, our presidents, and those in power, to empower those below them. Moore has a great quote that if a subordinate or a staff officer felt comfortable giving the order, give the order. So I was thinking about that in our volunteer fire service. And if we fail to trust our people, if we fail to prepare them, then we're not really preparing them to be future officers and make good decisions. So I used to pass on a little officer empowerment tidbit to my officers that simply said to ask the following: is it the right thing for the customer? Is it the right thing for our department? Is it legal, ethical, and nice? Is it safe? Is it in our organizational level and within our SOPs, SOGs? Is it something you are willing to be accountable for? And is it consistent with our department's values and policies? If the answer is yes to all of those questions, don't ask for permission. Just do it. And always remember, how would it look in the newspaper or on the news? Because sometimes we bog organizations down and we create this culture of indecisiveness or fear because our officers are afraid to make decisions. One of the best lines ever from the movie Midway, when two officers are talking and one officer is taking over for an ill officer, and the ill officer says to that one taking over, "Don't call it how you think I would call it. You call it how you want to call it, what your gut tells you to do." And if you follow these officer empowerment tidbits about is it right for our customer, our organization, is it legal and ethical, safe within the department SOP, SOG, is it consistent with our values, just do it. Just do it. Moore had rules of doubts when maybe they wouldn't want to do something in the military, but basically he followed that. He followed that. Unfortunately, he was surrounded by a lot of death in Vietnam, the Battle of Ia Drang Valley, for example. And he learned the importance of family and leaders taking sincere action in expressing personal condolences, sympathy, or any other appropriate steps to the families of those who were killed. And, one thing I learned as an officer and as a chief, it is so impactful on the family of our members and former members when we show up at their wakes. We had a member pass away who was what we call an exempt member. They were no longer going to calls. They hadn't been for years. They hadn't even been around the firehouse that often. Nonetheless, they passed away, and we assembled a crew to go to the wake. Most of the people that went to the wake didn't even know the member because the member was very elderly, and as I said, hadn't been on calls in years. And most of the crew that came with me was very young. When I walked in, you could feel a pin drop as the family focused on us, and we went up and saluted the casket and spent some time with the family, expressing our condolences and telling them that this member served with pride and distinction, even though it was years ago. They were one of our family members. The wife, the widow, was so touched she wrote the department an amazing thank you note, and in that letter expressed what it meant to that family for us to show up and spend a few minutes there and show that once a firefighter, always a firefighter. And chiefs and presidents, you have that power to make that happen in your department. And the pride we felt that we had that impact, the pride we felt as firefighters that night when we left, was second to none. Hal Moore says it best, it's the duty of any leader to take sincere action in expressing personal condolences, sympathy, or any other appropriate steps. Maybe that death occurred out of state and you can just write a nice letter on behalf of the officers and firefighters. But we are family, and it's important that we take care of family and remember those who served. Hal Moore has written quite a book filled with leadership lessons, points of interest, and yes, they do reflect a lot of military and combat leadership, but these lessons can definitely be applied in our volunteer fire service. As Hal Moore began closing out his career to an America that was full of dissension, the draft army that relied on the draft evolved into an all-volunteer army, a volunteer army. You think we can learn from that. They had to deal with protests, and he ends the book with many more leadership lessons that we can take. One particular area was the Army lowered their recruiting standards to get recruits. They switched to an all-volunteer force and had trouble attracting people because Vietnam had just ended. The military wasn't seen as a very attractive organization for people to go into, image. So the Army had a recruitment problem. Sound familiar? A recruitment problem that Hal Moore had to try and overcome. And he didn't like how the Army lowered their standards to meet quotas. And our volunteer fire service, we should not lower our standards to fill the quotas we have. We should still work hard to attract people of character. We should work hard to mold them into firefighters that we can be proud of. We should work hard to lead them in the right direction and not just try and fill quotas with numbers. Hal Moore finishes up with some great points on leadership that we'll end with tonight. Leadership is highly personal, an individual matter. Each leader must establish his own approach based on his internal compass, using a method geared to his personality, his capabilities, but always oriented toward accomplishing the mission while knowing and taking care of his men. And when we say men, we do mean men and women. As officers, we are given groups to lead. Other officers, NCOs or non-commissioned officers, and enlisted soldiers, folks just like your volunteer fire department, each has a different background, each has a different problem. Everybody has a different outlook and different duties. But no matter what their background or their previous experience, no matter how much love, care, and effort over the years by their parents in raising them, when they're turned over to us, they are now ours to care for. At that instant, the parent, the teachers, or the system that brought them to that point is in the past. Their lives and their future are largely in our hands, and it's a terrible responsibility for a fire team leader to have, not to speak of a battalion, division, or corps commander. I'll paraphrase that's a terrible responsibility for a fire team leader to have, not to speak of a lieutenant, captain, president, director, secretary, chief, or commissioner. Back to the book, we must take care of them and look out for their welfare. Dignity must always be respected. I feel that if anyone under me fails, the fault is at least half mine. A man should never be caused to think poorly of himself, and this requires a subtle and sensitive touch by the leader. The necessity for each to have complete confidence in his personal weapon as well as any other weapon he might have to handle, to include using radios and knowing the procedures for requesting and controlling mortar and artillery fire. We can apply that directly to the fire service by making sure our people are competent and confident in our weapons of firefighting and medical providing and extrication. A man, and again, when I say man, I mean men and women, must have confidence and trust in his leader. He must know and utterly believe in his leader and understand that they are competent professionals who know what they are doing and that they are not careless or casual in their look or outlook toward their responsibilities. So we're not blowing off that SCBA check. We're not skipping doing things half-assed. We are doing things the way they're supposed to be done. For a subordinate to be confident in his leader, the subordinate must know the leader is aware and appreciates what that subordinate must face and the life he must lead in performing his job, so the leader's out there doing it with them. In summary, as Hal Moore writes, my views are take care of the troops, develop four-way confidence, and be professional. This ensures we can carry out our first duty, accomplishment of the mission. Finally, concerning professionalism, I believe even now the clock is bringing us closer to some few seconds, minutes, or hours in the future when the professionalism we will have or will not have will make a life or death difference for the men, or women placed under our leadership and whose families can only trust, hope, and pray that we know our business. Your leadership, people, will be tested at some point. Whatever role it is you play in your volunteer fire department. Your ability, your mental and physical strength, your knowledge, your judgment, all will be tested at some point. Done enough to prepare for that moment. Have we trained enough? Have we studied enough? Have we read enough? Have we learned enough for when it happens? Are we prepared for what's coming in our firehouse? Are we prepared to lead our people? It's never too late to get better, to hit that reset button, to focus on professional development and strive to be the leader that Hal Moore outlined in this book. Be honest with yourself, people. Please understand it's important to invest in leadership training and professional development. Be honest with what you're getting in your organization, and then look in the mirror and say, can I do better? Can I do better as a leader? Can I be a better lieutenant? Can I do a better job on my truck check? Can I do a better job running that fire prevention program? Can I do a better job as a lieutenant, cap, treasurer, secretary? Can I do the minutes better? Can I work harder to get that grant? Can I do a better job as the chief or the president? Can I do better as a firefighter and lead myself in a professional direction as a professional firefighter? Can I inspire? Can I encourage? Can I mentor and motivate other professional firefighters to follow? That's what my message is for this evening. This was a book that touched me. This was a book that is filled with notes and highlights and so many lessons that can be applied to our volunteer fire service if we look in the mirror, if we look at these examples of good, solid leadership and see where they apply in our volunteer firehouse, see how they apply in our personal jobs in our volunteer firehouse, see where they apply in your personal life. And that's where we end tonight. Please remember Hal Moore. Google him, Lieutenant General Hal Moore, in his book, Hal Moore on Leadership, Winning When Outgunned and Outmanned. Add it to your collection. It's an easy read. It's just over 150 pages of easy reading, and I'm sure, like me, you'll be taking notes and you'll be thinking of your own volunteer firehouse and where these lessons apply. Folks, I'm no expert. I can only learn from those that have been there. Yeah, I got some personal examples and some success stories and several failures as well, and I want to pass those on to you. I am proud to announce that I'm very close to finishing another presentation that I will be offering, officer development and leadership success in the volunteer firehouse. I'm putting the finishing touches on that now and will be rolling that out and offering it to people in the very near future. Lessons I've learned, lessons I've read about, success and failures that I would love to share with you, because we all want to get better, because leadership is so important in the volunteer firehouse. I think leadership is going to play a huge role in the revival and success in the future of the volunteer fire service. Be that leader. I say be that leader no matter what office you hold, as a probie, as a firefighter, as an executive officer or administrative officer, or as a line officer on the firematic side. Remember, FDIC 2018 from April 23rd to the 28th, I will be presenting the Professional Volunteer Fire Department on Tuesday of that week, and would love to see you in my class where I could meet more great firefighters, talk about successes. Love to have you in my class where I talk about 12 building blocks to building a professional foundation in your volunteer firehouse. If anyone would like to talk to me more, have me bring the presentation. Got quite a bit of travel coming up. Just been a couple weeks ago. East Franklin, New Jersey had me out. Great group there. Dan Krashenski, and so many other great guys out there that I met, and girls. Reach out to me on Facebook. You know, my professional volunteer page is just shy of 6,000 likes. I would love to hit 6,000 likes this week. I think I'm 20 away. Please reach out and like the Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page. Reach out to me at my email, tamerrill63@aol.com. You can email me. I'm on Twitter. I'd love to talk to you. Love to bring my presentation to you. Love to offer you my new leadership presentation as well. But thank you for listening in tonight. And as I do every month, I'd like to end on a shout-out. I always signal out a volunteer firefighter or volunteer fire department that's done something extraordinary, deserving of a pat on the back, or somebody who just needs a little support, such as tonight. It's from my own hometown. Love to get a shout-out to Timothy Richardson. He's a 16-year-old explorer from my area, just outside Buffalo, New York. And right now he's facing the battle of his life. He's asking fellow firefighters to come to his rescue. For he was just diagnosed with leukemia last month, so it kind of put him on the sidelines of doing what he loves most, and also preparing for his dream job of being a firefighter. So he's asking for shirts, fire department shirts, to wear one each day of his treatment as he goes through leukemia treatment. His father's a firefighter at a local fire department as well. His sister's a former explorer herself, and they're all by his side. He's a member of the Highview Fire Company in Cheektowaga, New York. And he's asking for fire department T-shirts. Information can be found on his Facebook page, Timmy's Battle. And if you'd love to donate one of your department T-shirts, his size is extra large. He's also looking for anything else, patches and badges. And so many have been sent that the hospital he's at had to start directing them elsewhere. I believe they had over 500 packages in the mail room at the hospital last night. So these packages can be sent to Timothy Richardson at the Ucrest Fire Department, the address 255 Clover Place in Cheektowaga, New York, 14225. Timothy Richardson, an explorer from the Highview Fire Company, looking for fire department T-shirts while he's being treated for leukemia over the next month or so. So consider sending him some of your department T-shirts. And Timothy, this is for you. Stay strong, my friend. We're with you, brother. We got your back, as you know, so many people have been doing. So again, if you'd like to reach out to him, it's Timothy Richardson. You can send your shirts to the Ucrest Fire Department at 255 Clover Place in Cheektowaga, New York, 14225. He's got a Facebook page, Timmy's Battle. Stay strong, brother. Folks, thanks for listening in tonight. I hope you appreciated some of the lessons that were passed on. Maybe you learned a few things, maybe you didn't. But we can all get better. We can all be more professional. We can all be better leaders. My next show is scheduled for Monday, March 16th. Yeah, Monday, March 16th. It's not going to be a Tuesday show. I had to do some switching around due to my work schedule. So it's Monday, April 16th, my next show. Monday, April 16th. And then I'll also be coming to you live from FDIC on Thursday, April 26th from 1:30 till 2 o'clock. Thanks for tuning in tonight or listening in whenever you happen to be. And please stay safe. And remember, folks, that developing, maintaining, and upholding a professional reputation is the duty and it's the responsibility of all firefighters, paid or volunteer. Till next time, take care.